Adversity is like a bad word. Many people don't want to even consider that a loving God would allow adversity, even heartache, into our lives. They want to believe that a loving and gracious and merciful God would just make it easy. We would just have His blessing. Which is why the prayer of Jabez, which effectively tells the story of a man who is blessed by God with no heartache, became an international bestseller. People gravitated to the idea of receiving God's blessings effortlessly. But could it be that adversity is what separates, what makes a distinction among God's people between those who are committed to receiving all that God has for them and those that are willing to accept second best? In fact, what we see is how often God allowed adversity, used adversity to promote His heroes of the faith, that He allowed it so that it would propel His people forward. Could it be that the path to blessing, to promotion, lies not in avoiding adversity, but on the other side of it? In Deuteronomy, Moses is preparing the people to receive all that God had for them, the promised land. But in God's eyes, it was so much more. It wasn't just a residence, a habitation, but rather it was an inheritance that He had promised them repeatedly for hundreds of years. Over 400 years earlier, He had committed to Abraham that He was giving it to His people. This wasn't just a promise, it was an absolute commitment from God. But what Moses says to the people is, God has given you this land. In other words, like they had spiritual title to it. And God will defeat every enemy. He'll knock down every obstacle before you. Sounds great. But then He goes on and says, and you will push them out. See, that is an image of the partnership we have with God, that God does the amazing and the miraculous, but we still have a role to play. And that they would receive God's best by moving forward in faith. Later, God says to Joshua, Moses' replacement, He says, be strong and of good courage because of the challenges, the adversity, the obstacles they would face. But He goes on and says, you will cause this people to take possession, to receive their inheritance, and no man will be able to stand against you. It doesn't say that they will flee before you, but rather as you come forward, as you move forward in faith, in trusting God, you would have the victory. See, God's people would face nations. Every single one, every army was greater than them. And the path to them receiving God's best, the promotion, the inheritance, was by moving forward, facing the adversity, facing the obstacles in faith, and then watching God move. See, that's what separated so many who along the way, when they ran into challenges, when they ran into things they didn't understand, were willing to settle for second best. Rather than acknowledging they didn't understand, that God not only allowed but often orchestrated challenges and obstacles so He would prepare and promote His people. On a side note, what He said to them was that He didn't want to give it to them all at once, but He would give them the victory little by little as they grew in strength and ability to possess what He had for them. It's a reminder that the path to blessing, to promotion, so often lies on the other side of the adversity.